And so tonight, here we are at the beginning of what will be the year-long 50th anniversary of the year that changed America, the year that changed American politics, 1968. It was a year like no other in our history, especially our political history. It was a deadly year for the 16,589 Americans killed in the Vietnam War that year. And it was a deadly year on the presidential campaign trail, with the anti-war Democratic presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy being assassinated when he seemed to be on his way to winning the Democratic presidential nomination. The Kennedy assassination came 2 months after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, which rocked the country and rocked the presidential campaign. And it was the year when the right wing in Republican politics finally managed to coalesce around an acceptable candidate and win the presidency. It is that same right wing that 50 years later has given us President Trump. And in that 50 years, the American right wing has not gotten any wiser. And its candidate is now clearly the most dangerous person who has ever occupied the White House, the first and only president who casually issues threats of nuclear war on a whim, as the president did tonight in a tweet that should have already activated the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to remove the president as unfit to serve under the 25th Amendment. That tweet, as I just read, says North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I, too, have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. 50 years ago, you could get in serious political trouble in this country by even suggesting that you were willing to use nuclear weapons, as one of the vice presidential candidates did in the 1968 presidential campaign. I titled my recent book about the 1968 presidential campaign Playing with Fire, because to some extent, that's what all the presidential candidates were doing, some knowingly and some unknowingly. But no one in presidential history has ever played with fire more publicly and recklessly than Donald Trump. Tonight, the president is threatening nuclear war with a country the size of Pennsylvania. This is a level of madness never seen before anywhere in the world. There has been open speculation about President Trump possibly starting a nuclear war simply to distract attention from, or to use as a cover for dismantling, the special prosecutor's investigation of the president. And no one can say that that is wild and irresponsible speculation. As we enter the 50th anniversary of 1968, it is easier than it should be to imagine 2018 being even worse than 1968. Worse only because a profoundly reckless man of questionable sanity is president of the United States. Richard Nixon won the 1968 presidential campaign, and that is when he began committing the political crimes that eventually led to his resigning the presidency. In an interview with Politico, Richard Nixon's White House counsel, John Dean, sees the similarities between Team Nixon and Team Trump.
It's really how remarkable that little they've learned about what went on in the past. Every signal they've thrown from the get-go has been, we're covering this up. They've done nothing to try to really dispose of it. The whole attitude has been, we're hiding something. And so I can only conclude they are hiding something.
Recent reporting by the New York Times reveals that the Trump campaign advisor, George Papadopoulos, played a crucial role in the FBI's decision to open an investigation last year into the Trump campaign's contacts with Russia, opening that investigation while the campaign was still going on. According to the New York Times, during a night of heavy drinking at an upscale London bar in May 2016, George Papadopoulos made a startling revelation to Australia's top diplomat in Britain. Russia had political dirt on Hillary Clinton. Court documents show that about 3 weeks earlier, a professor with alleged Kremlin contacts told George Papadopoulos that the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. Following the release of the hacked Democratic Party emails Australian officials warned their American counterparts about the information George Papadopoulos had provided to this Australian diplomat. As the Times reports, the hacking and the revelation that a member of the Trump campaign may have had inside information about it were driving factors that led the FBI to open an investigation. Now, when a large political organization like the Nixon administration or the Trump campaign or the Trump administration is being investigated by a special prosecutor, no one in that organization knows exactly who else in that organization is in possession of the most damaging information. No one in the Trump campaign or the Trump administration knows exactly what everyone else knows or might know. And so no one knows who the biggest threats are. The biggest threats to Donald Trump himself. Is Michael Flynn, who has already pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, a bigger threat to President Trump than George Papadopoulos? How much does Michael Flynn know? How much does George Papadopoulos know? Here's John Dean again on that question of how much do they know?
They didn't know how much I knew. I knew much more than they thought I did. Not that I was involved in it, but just I had picked it up over the years of being there. And so I became their worst nightmare. And, you know, I was determined to end it once and for all and just clean the whole thing up. When I did finally testify, I, you know, with Flynn and his proximity, he even has had more proximity than did I. He could be a remarkable witness.
A remarkable witness. Their worst nightmare.